Remember the Calgary Vipers? Yeah, it's been a while since I've been able to get back into my Remember the Calgary Series. Well, in this episode number 23, going to talk about the Calgary Vipers, the last professional baseball team to represent Calgary. Not going too far back. I mean, it's been 10 years since they last played their game in 2011. But the Calgary Vipers, they represented Calgary in a couple of baseball leagues, the Northern Baseball League and the Golden Baseball League from 2005 till 2011. So before I get into my notes, there's definitely a few tidbits to really talk about with the Calgary Vipers in the 7 seasons that they played in Calgary. Well, I mean, professional baseball in Calgary, I don't think is ever going to be as big as it was with the Cannons, but this was kind of another one of those teams to try to recreate it. But, just various factors that I'll touch upon in this video. But let's just say there was one strange transaction that happened in the history of the Calgary Vipers, and one local hero actually happened to play a couple games for the Calgary Vipers, so I'll touch upon in this video. As I say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, and as a Calgary sports fan, I mostly do talk about the current teams, the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders. But I just felt last year, when I decided to start the series, that I felt that it was neat to look back on Calgary sports teams from the past. And my inspirations that I have all the links in the description below with as well where I get my information from was when I did the Calgary Hitmen Corral series, and definitely it's tugged on me a lot more that the Stampede Corral has been demolished. But that kind of started that inspiration, and I already talked about those teams. As well as See a Dead Clothing, the clothing company that specializes in Calgary sports teams in the past, as well landmarks, so they have diversified out. I even saw some radio stations, and that Chris Wilson story where sharing his jersey collection. So I have all that in the description below. And then if you want to see the previous episode, in my Remember the Calgary Series 22, I talked about the Cougars and Trojans, and I didn't realize that I was actually talking about what is eventually the Mount Royal University Cougars, and there was a Trojans hockey team. Not my St. Trojans from college, but there was a college Trojans team that was in the senior league, so I matched those two together in this episode. But now let's talk about the Calgary Vipers, the last professional baseball team to represent Calgary, and I don't think we're going to see one anytime soon because hasn't been any movement for landing another team. And then I figure that after when the Cannons left in 2002, and that will be the next episode in my Remember the Calgary series, that we had the Calgary Outlaws. So if you go back to episode 2, which happened after the Cannons in the short-lived Canadian Baseball League. Then in episode 7, actually before the Cannons, we had the Cardinals and Expos in the Pioneer League, which were a subsidiary part of the St. Louis Cardinals and the Montreal Expos franchise. So you can look at that in episode 7. But the Vipers, as I mentioned, they were a baseball team. It was an independent baseball league. They weren't affiliated with any Major League Baseball team. That played from Calgary from 2005 to 2011. And all the teams that I mentioned, baseball teams that I mentioned and still talk about, played at Foothills Stadium, which is near McMahon Stadium. And I actually recently did a walking tour looking at that and looking back at the, how Foothills Stadium looks today. And I think it's slated for demolition because after 2011, other than the University of Calgary baseball team, that stadium has not been used much. So the Calgary Vipers were the last major tenant to use that facility. And the season usually starts around, let's say, after Victoria Day, and then the playoffs happen Labor Day weekend. Because I do remember it was in the 2011 season, the last season that the Vipers were around, that I actually caught a bunch of games. And it was a fun experience, affordable, get out, enjoy the sun in the summer. But it definitely was not the same experience that we lost from the Cannons, but still got us 7 seasons out of it and got some strange stories. As mentioned, they played in the North American and Golden Baseball Leagues from 2005 till 2011, and they actually won the Golden Baseball League Championship in 2009. So they did have some success after some initial speed bumps. So let's first look at, I know I have lots of tabs open just to compile my notes, but this is on the Wikipedia page, that the Calgary Vipers were a professional baseball team that played obviously right here in Calgary. They were part of the Western Division of the Independent North American League. And so the Vipers played all their home games in Foothills Stadium. Previously, in the first 3 seasons, in 2005 to 2007, they were in the Northern League first, and then that league merged into the Golden Baseball League, and that's where they played from 2008 till 2010, and in 2011 they were in there was another league that they played in 2011 I'll touch upon. And then I mentioned that they won the championship in 2009 when they defeated the Tucson Toros in the championship series. So that is the kind of the gist of the Calgary Vipers. They played in a few different leagues. They won some league championships because they went to the finals the following year in 2010 but did not win. Or as I mentioned, they won the league championship, Golden Baseball League in the 2009, and there was the Arizona Winter League. That's what I meant to say. They actually were in the Arizona Winter League in 2010 and only in 2010. And then they won some division championships, 3 division championships in 3 straight years in 2007, 8, and 9. And then there was Mike Bush and Morgan Burkhart, who were the 2 managers. So the Vipers only had 2 managers the whole time that they existed. And you can see the colors, black, maroon, and silver. That's the primary colors of the Calgary Vipers. And then why they ended in 2011. And when I was going to games back in 2011, I was wondering how the heck did they make money? Because Foothills Stadium can hold about 6,000 fans. I know during its heyday when we had the Cannons, we had some games that can get over 8,000 fans in temporary bleachers. But I remember games that I went to. I didn't think I might remember like on an August long weekend, and I remember in the August long weekend back in 2011, there was a guy named Dave the Horn Man that was kind of the feature attraction, and it was like nice and hot that weekend, and I think they had about 3,000 fans. That was the most I remember in attendance at that time, and that was the biggest crowds. There was other times they might have barely got over 1,000, but it mentioned that management problem surfaced just prior to the end of the 2011 season, and by the end of the 2011 season, it became apparent the Vipers were financially more bound, because there was a story that I share in the link from CBC that there were financial issues apparent that the players and the employees were still looking to get their final pay, and that came up at the end of the 2011 season, and that was it for the Calgary Vipers. But the history is, I remember that it did start off a little rocky, and then eventually it took time to pick up. Because I mentioned, Calgary had been served by the Cannons in the Pacific Coast Hockey League, or the Pacific Coast Baseball League, I meant to say. Enough hockey, I've talked to enough hockey teams in this series. The PCL, the Pacific Coast League, for 18 years before the team moved to Albuquerque in 2002. And then we had the short-lived Outlaws in 2003 in the short-lived Independent Canadian Baseball League, which only played up until the All-Star games, so you can look back on episode 2. And actually, I also forgot to mention that at the same time, if you go back to episode number 17, we also had, they're now in Okotoks, the Okotoks Dogs, which they were a major Western Major Baseball team, which serves college-level players. Actually, at the time, the Vipers and Dogs, they kind of had a, butting heads with lease of the stadium when the Vipers first came in. In 2006, the Dogs ceased operations, and then they decided to move shop down to Okotoks. And if you look at episode 17, and backed by the Seaman brothers, the owners of the Calgary Flames, I'm going to say that Seaman Stadium down in Okotoks is a lot more beautiful, although it's more modern than what we have here in Calgary. But I'm going to say what happened there was the best for the Dogs franchise. But that was all the other baseball history. And with the, just going to say that I don't think the demand is quite there in Calgary, and the fact that we have an outdoor stadium in crazy weather, I think it's going to be hard to see professional baseball coming back to Calgary in the future. But the Northern League announced in April 2004 that it was expanding to Alberta. So they granted a franchise in Edmonton and Calgary. The Edmonton franchise, I always like to make fun. It's always easy to make fun of Edmonton as a Calgary sports fan, but I remember they were called the Cracker Cats. And I was thinking, what the heck is a Cracker Cat? I know there's an oil and gas term called the cracking, and there's their own cats, but then they were also nicknamed the Capitals. And then also what made this weird, that the Calgary franchise was owned by a pair of Japanese businessmen, Hiro Masawa and Yao Higuchi, and incorporated as Calgary Baseball LLC. But what made this really weird is that they were based in Japan. To the distance into the Alberta franchise in the Northern League base in the Midwest US, two teams were required to pay $60,000 Canadian to travel subsidy offset the cost for the teams to fly into the city. So that definitely was off to a rocky start with the ownership first buying the team. And then first the Northern League, 2004-07, well, we actually started playing in 2005. It said the Calgary Baseball LLC had promised significantly to renovate the aging Foothills Stadium. I think that stadium was built in 1965, around there, which is definitely falling even more in disrepair. If you look at my McMahon Stadium, Foothills Stadium video, you can probably see that that stadium definitely is showing its age, and I think redevelopment plans eventually has that being demolished if they want to go ahead with that field house. But however, little movement was seen initially back in 2004 and then it also says that little movement was seen with the franchise causing the league to investigate the status of the team in November 2004. A month later, in December, still in 2004, Commissioner Mike Stone announced that he revoked the franchise. So the Vipers almost didn't exist from the beginning of the LLC, Calgary Baseball LLC group. However, on February 11th, 2005, the league sold the franchise to Winnipeg businessman Jerry Guidry. He had less than 3 months to put something together, put the staff and players together, but then the team quickly just named themselves the Vipers. It doesn't say how we came up with the name of the Calgary Vipers. This is my personal guess that maybe, this is in southern Alberta. Mind you, it's more in the southeast corner, especially towards the Medicine Hat area. There definitely is some snakes that hang around in that part of the province where it's a lot more drier and hotter down there, especially in summer. But it looked like back in 2004, the Vipers weren't able to come together. But then, the Winnipeg Goldeyes, that's why they seem to be more stable franchises in the independent baseball group, and they have a nice stadium that I saw, the Goldeye Stadium, a few times that I've been to Winnipeg. But we were able to get a team eventually in 2005. And I said, despite the short time frame, the Vipers managed to build a quality team on the field, finishing second in the North Division in both halves of the season. At the first part of the history, the season was broken up in two halves, so I know that was also normal during the Cannons when they were here from the Pacific Coast League, but everything was all graded for a whole season in the last season. And then I mentioned that they played their first game in franchise history on the road against the Soyuz City Explorers, this going back to May 20th, 2005, losing 7-3. However, they won their first game the following night by defeating the Explorers 12-2. That's what's interesting about baseball is you play every day, it's like every day is a different day. And then the team played their first game at home on May 27th as we played the Joliet Jackhammers, and we beat them 9-8 in 11 innings. So what a way to make an introduction that we'll have extra innings in the first home game. Off the field, though, it says the Vipers finished last in attendance in the first season, averaging just over 1,100 fans. However, crowds slowly improved as the season went on, and Vipers grew from a bare-bones operation, considering that it looked like they weren't going to come together, and then were revived when that Winnipeg business owner bought the team and suddenly had to just put something together. But also, if you remember in 2005, as I say, the season starts, after Victoria Day, goes until the late August and then playoffs in September. Well, before 2013, they called the flood of the century happened. Calgary had a lot of rain in June 2005, so that definitely hurt attendance then, as there was record rainfall in the month of June. So it took some time, I think, for the Calgary Vipers to establish themselves in the community. But I just felt that, once we lost the Cannons, when it came to all the other baseball teams that followed, it was just trying to recreate it, but it's like we lost something that, ultimately came down to, the stadium and finances, and I'll touch more upon that in the next episode when I talk about the Cannons. However, we mentioned Calgary and Edmonton. It's not a Battle of Alberta until Calgary and Edmonton fight and meet up. Well, on June 13th, 2006, the day after my birthday, this would have been a nice birthday present. A string of beanballs in the first two innings touched off two major balls at the time when the Calgary Vipers were taking on the Edmonton Cracker Cats. So there was a brawl with Calgary and Edmonton in 2006. As after Edmonton's pitcher Greg Morrison was hit by a Calgary pitch in the fourth time in 5 games, the Cracker Cats responded by throwing at 2 Calgary players, resulting in the melee that was so violent that the umpires sent both teams off the field and suspended the game for over an hour to consult with league officials. So even on the baseball diamond independently, Calgary and Edmonton seems to have a fight in the Battle of Alberta. When the Cracker Cats refused to return to the field afterwards, the game was declared a forfeit and the Vipers were awarded 9-0. Yes! Gotta throw that in there. But then the league came down hard on both teams as both managers and 7 players were suspended for a total of 79 games. In total, Morrison blamed the Calgary manager Mike Bush for the incident, but that Bush continued to hold a grudge after both Morrison and a former Viper, J.P. Frausk, defected the Cracker Cats after leaving the Vipers, falling out at that time, I meant to say, with the Calgary manager late in 2005. So, gotta throw in this Battle of Alberta story as well. And then it says the Vipers finished first in division in the first half of 2007, 29 and 19, and qualified for the playoffs the first time. So the first 2 seasons, the Vipers did not make the playoffs, but we eventually made the playoffs every year afterwards by the looks of it. So during that season, it was outfielder Darryl Brinkley became the first minor baseball league player in the modern era to achieve a .400 batting average. So there's some history there as well. Brinkley was also named the Independent League Player of the Year by Baseball America. So here's some other tidbits where Calgary Vipers made some significant history. Then I mentioned in the playoffs they faced off the second half winning Fargo and Moorhead Redhawks in the North Division Championship. The Vipers defeated the Redhawks 9-4 in the first game of the series to win their playoff debut. So once we got into the playoffs, we definitely made the most of it. En route to a 3-game sweep of Fargo as they won the pennant and earned a berth in the Northern League Championship Series. So we got a first pennant by making the playoffs. The Vipers won the first game in the final series against the Gary Shore Rail Cats 7-6 on a 2-run walk-off home run by Carlos Duncan. I do remember Carlos Duncan back in the day, but I also do remember that he also played on the Edmonton Capitals towards the end of the tenure of the Calgary Vipers in 2011. The teams traded wins in the first 4 games, forcing the series to go to a 5th game. However, the Rail Cats won the championship game in Game 5, 5-1, so we were on the wrong end of that in the end of the Northern League. So after 2007, we moved off to the Golden Baseball League. And then leaving the Northern League, the playoff run would have proved that the team's last hurrah in the Northern League, as both the Vipers and the Edmonton Cracker Cats announced they would be leaving the league after declining to post $1 million performance bonds asked to play for the Northern League, as both teams jumped to the California-based Golden Baseball League. So that was the Northern Baseball League part of the Calgary Vipers. And then we were in the Golden Baseball League in 2008 to 2010. And then it says the Vipers were making headlines since moving to the Golden Baseball League, as we signed a former NHL star in terms of Theoren Fleury. Keep in mind, though, he did not play the whole season with the Calgary Vipers, and I'll have a few stories linked in the description below on Theoren Fleury. But yes, Theoren Fleury actually played for the Calgary Vipers just for a doubleheader on a weekend in August. And yes, he wore number 14. If you know about Theoren Fleury's story and journey, that he also played baseball growing up. Of course, hockey. I mean, he's most known for playing for hockey. And why isn't he not in the Hockey Hall of Fame yet? But I don't think he's going to get into the Baseball Hall of Fame anytime soon. But they suggested that former National Hockey League star Theoren Fleury was considered playing for the Vipers. So the former Calgary Flame took batting practice with the team and threw out the first pitch in their home opener. And then it was later that season. I remember it was a doubleheader. He only played 3 games, or 2 games I should say. Had 3 at-bats. He had actually hit a single at his first at-bat. And I know in that story there's a couple clips of Theoren Fleury where he was at-bat. He actually was able to hit a single, got a single, and then I think there was another play where he was sliding to second base and he slid to prevent a double play. And then he actually he was an outfielder when Theoren Fleury did play. He actually caught a ball in center field. So yeah, Theoren Fleury briefly played for the Calgary Vipers. You may or may not know that, but and then, as I said, the next play he charged hard for second and was forced out, but I think that broke up a potential double play. So yeah, even Theoren Fleury was a little feisty on the ball diamond, but that was just trying a way to spur up some attention. I mean, it was a different time in life then, but it would have been the throw. And now keep in mind, that was a year before Theoren Fleury, because it was the 2009-10 NHL season, that he tried his luck to come back in the National Hockey League. He felt he wanted to make amends because if you know the Theoren Fleury story, he definitely had to deal with some off-ice demons, and then it came out that he was unfortunately sexually abused by Graham James. But this is all part of the Theoren Fleury story that I remember knowing that he played baseball growing up and he was pretty good at it, and he even played for the Vipers. But that is the part where I talked about that we signed a former local sports hero and icon. So now here's a very, very strange story, a strange transaction. Then the Vipers traded pitcher John Odom to the Laredo Broncos of the United Baseball League. You know what he got traded for? Sometimes in hockey we say, oh, this player's a bum. We can't trade him even for, a bag of hockey pucks or for some hockey sticks. Well, John Odom, he actually got traded for 10 baseball bats. Yes. The Calgary Vipers made headlines for this reason too, with this strange change. Because we were wanting to get John Odom from Laredo. Odom wasn't able to enter Canada. He was turned away at the Canadian border due to an unspecified criminal charge on the record. So what happened is that with the 10 bats that we got for the trade, the Vipers intended to auction the bats to raise off funds for the Snakes and Batters charity fund. However, they were instead sold to Ripley's, believe it or not, for $10,000. So yes, the Calgary Vipers made some headlines with that Battle of Alberta, which actually that made it on TSN. There's a YouTube clip where that made it on to TSN. And then Theoren Fleury playing briefly for the Calgary Vipers. And we made a trade for 10 bats. So this is wacky. Independent baseball. And then, measures on September 5th, 2008, the Vipers won the Golden Baseball League North Division Championship outright by sweeping the Cracker Cats 3-0. Yes. On September 14th, however, we lost the best-of-5 series to the Orange County Flyers. Boo. 3-2. But we had the rest season in 2009. As in the 2009 season, the Vipers won both halves of the season, qualifying for the playoffs as the North Division regular season champions, along with the second place. Now they're called the Edmonton Capitals, less lame of a name than the Cracker Cats. In the playoffs, the Vipers won the first round series against the Capitals for their second straight championship. I gotta put that in there. Then the Vipers set a franchise record in Game 4 with 4,859 fans in attendance. And that's where I got back to the, did I wonder how they're going to make money? And then it mentions in the championship on September 12th, 2009, the Vipers finally won their first professional baseball league championship by defeating the Tucson Toros 3-1 to capture the GBL, the Golden Baseball League championship in front of 2,000 fans at Foothills Stadium. They eliminated the Edmonton Capitals by the same 3-1 in the North Division Championship to get back to the finals. So, second time was a charm for the Calgary Vipers to win the Golden Baseball League Championship. So I'm going to say this was the height of the Calgary Vipers as they won 3-1 in both series. It was the second straight year that they defeated a rival team from Edmonton. And it's also the first pro baseball championship for the city of Calgary ever. The Calgary Cannons, as I'll touch upon in the next episode of the AAA Pacific Coast League, they lost twice in the championship. I remember the Calgary Cannons did get to the league final a couple times back in the day, but they were not on the right end of it both times. So this is the first time a Canadian team has captured a title, and the first ever to do so over a privately owned franchise to do so. So there's more history for the Calgary Vipers and Go Canada. Then I mentioned in brackets the Orange County Flyers, who won the title the previous year, originally a league-owned team before they were sold to their current private ownership. So that's just another tidbit. And then the Vipers won the championship on their third straight try after losing the league title in 2007 for the Northern League and then the Golden Baseball League in 2008. So this is where I'm going to say the Vipers had their most success on the field. And then it talks about the Arizona Winter League version in 2010. I don't remember much about this in my mind, but in 2009, October 2009, it was announced that the Vipers had launched a new instructional version of the team to play in the Arizona Winter League in 2010. So there was another rendition of the Calgary Vipers. So, and then they were replacing the departed Palm Springs Chill. That's kind of a oxymoron, the Palm Springs Chill, knowing that Palm Springs is one of the hottest places in the United States, who formed its own instructional league. They will play the new Canadian division along with the Saskatchewan Silver Sox, Team Canada, and the Western Canada Miners. They are managed by the AWE by former Montreal Expo legend Boots Day. So go Canada. They also served as the bench coach for the parent JBL team. The Vipers in this Arizona league, they defeated the San Luis Atleticos 8-1, or it's probably San Luis Atleticos. That's my best Latin. In the AWL Championship game, shortened to 8 innings due to rain, they became the first team in history to capture both the Golden Baseball League and the Arizona Winter League. Go Vipers! Since the titles of the GBL's and the AWL's respective inceptions. More impressive, it was done within one calendar year, as this was the only year that the Calgary Vipers were in the Arizona Winter League. And then they were in the North American League in 2011, which happened to be their last season, as the Vipers are one of 6 former Golden Baseball League teams to join the newly formed North American League in 2010 to begin play in 2011, and that was it due to the financial issues. So that's kind of the touch on the brief history of the Calgary Vipers. I'm going to say things didn't look good at the beginning for, business-wise for the Vipers to actually come together. But I think when we come together, we did well once we got into the playoffs, winning some championships up here and down in Arizona. A couple wacky stories. Well, Theoren Fleury playing for the Calgary Vipers and trading for 10 bats. So that's baseball for you on the independent level. So when it comes to season by season record, well, in 2005, overall they were 51-44. They were 25-22 to finish second in the first half, and they were 26-22 to finish second in the second half. So they did not qualify for the playoffs. Back then, winning the halves meant you qualified for the playoffs. And then in 2006, they did not do as well as they were in the North Division, as they were 19-29 in the first half to finish fourth. But in the second half, well, they were just under 500 at 23-25, finished third. So overall, they were 42-54 for 498 winning percentage, and that was the worst record for the Calgary Vipers and did not make the playoffs. Then in 2007, in the first year that they made the playoffs, they were 29-19 in the first half and qualified for the playoffs. The second half, though, they didn't do as well, as they were 21-27, but they secured a spot in the playoffs. So overall, they were 50-45. and they won the North Division pennant by 3-0 by defeating the Fargo Moorhead Redhawks, but then they lost the championship series to the Gary North Shore Rail Cats 3-2. So, and then in 2008, when first half they were 26-18 for first in the first half and qualified for the playoffs. Second half they didn't do as well, but I think maybe your tendencies change knowing that you're in the playoffs. They were 19-24 for second in the second half, so overall in 2008 they were 45-42, but then they won the pennant by defeating the Edmonton Cracker Cats 3 straight. Then they lost to Orange County 3-2 in the championship series. Then in 2009, which I say was the best season for the Calgary Vipers, as in the first half they were 26-13 for first place, and then in the second half they were 23-14, so they swept both halves of the season, so an aggregate of 49-27 for a .645 winning percentage. And then they won the pennant by defeating Edmonton. It's always great to beat Edmonton. And then they won Tucson to win the championship 3-1. And then in 2010, in the Golden Baseball League, the first half they did not do as well, as they were 23-20, finished third, but in the second half they rebounded, and they were 30-15 to finish first in the second half. So the aggregate, they were 53-35 for a .602 winning percentage. But then they lost the divisional playoff to the Chico Outlaws, which the thing I remember with the Chico Outlaws is that their uniforms and logo actually looks very similar to the Calgary Outlaws from the short-lived Canadian Baseball League. And then the last season in 2011, when they were in the North American Baseball League, as there was no halves. This was all in one season, and this was the season that I caught the most games. As actually, this was the only season that I actually caught Calgary Viper games live. They finished second in the league, 53-33, finished second. But I did catch some playoff games, and we lost to Edmonton Capitals 4-2, as that was it for the playoffs, and that was ultimately it for the Vipers and the whole Golden Baseball League, or the North American Baseball League, due to financial issues, because I know Edmonton also folded as well. And when you look at baseball in Canada, with the exception of the Toronto Blue Jays, who are the only Major League Baseball team, and I always hope that maybe the Montreal Expos will come back. I can dream maybe the Tampa Bay Rays will finally not be viable in Tampa Bay, and that would be awesome if that could happen. Hypothetically, if the Tampa Bay Rays moved to Montreal and have Toronto and Tampa Bay, well, Toronto, Montreal in the same division, because they were in the same division as Tampa Bay. But getting back to what I was going to say, I remember one of the best baseball video games I had was 2005 MVP Baseball, which that one you can follow all the leagues. I remember there was a team called the Ottawa Lynx, and they were a AAA team, and I think it was in 2012 that they were the last AAA level baseball team to represent Canada that relocated. So I don't think Canada has any AAA baseball leagues. I think the Vancouver Canadians that I remember from the Calgary Cannons, they're a single A team. So maybe Calgary could potentially maybe get a single A team again, just like going back to the Pioneer League with the Cardinals and Expos. But that's all I have for when it comes to the Calgary Vipers, looking at the history and record by record. I know that I have other links that I share in the description below. That one player that you could say is that was the face of the franchise for the Calgary Vipers, that was in for the whole season. I also do remember him very well from the times that I caught games live, was Drew Miller, the outfielder. You could say he was the big slugger, and he was one of the faces of the Calgary Vipers, as I think he played all season, like the whole franchise history of the Calgary Vipers. And he also was from Medicine Hat, so go Canada. So he had a localish player on the Calgary Vipers, and they actually nicknamed him the Bat with the Hat. So there's a story talking about remembering Calgary's last professional baseball team with the Vipers with Drew Miller, so I have that in the description, called the YYC scene. So that's what I have when it comes to Drew Miller. I mean, I do remember him very well. He was a very recognizable player, and I think he recognized eventually regular fans in attendance at Foothills Stadium. He's like, hey, how you doing? I mean, He was actually only a couple years older than me. I was born in, said 1980, so, and then, Canadian. He was, from Medicine Hat, so Albertan as well. Although I saw he was born in January, so can't touch everything. Can't spoil me, not a Gemini. And then I have the baseball cube links where I have all the links about the season by season where you can look at all the records and the stats and the rosters. I'm not going to go over because there's just too many to go over, but I have all that in the description. With the baseball cube, I do remember other players that I do remember. I mean, if I look back on the 2011 roster and batting stats, because that was the teams I watched the most. Well, I mean, Drew Miller was the face of the franchise, I would say, as he was an outfielder, as he did lead the, if I can find his name, he did lead the team in home runs. He had 12 home runs and 61 RBIs, although there was Gary Perez, the second baseman, who had 86 RBIs, who actually lead the team in RBIs in the 2011 season, the last season that the Vipers were around. Other players I do remember, I remember Johnny Kaplan. And actually, the other unique thing with baseball is that everyone has their, at bat song. And I know Johnny Kaplan, he definitely got that for Johnny Be Good. I remember him. And then there was I remember Gary Perez, Eleno Garcia. Actually, I also remember there was another team. I'm not too sure if it was the Chico Outlaws, but there was actually a couple names that were familiar because of familiarity with other pop culture. Well, there actually was a player I remember that played in the league named Brian Burke. The same as the executive, but I think he spelled his name B-R-Y-A-N, not Brian Burke as in the hockey executive. But then there was another player named Bobby Hill. Any first thing that comes to mind, especially with Bobby Hill and baseball, is King and Hill and Hank's son. So there were some fans that rattle him talking, making King of the Hill references. But I know in the baseball cube they highlight players that actually spent some time in the major leagues. And actually in the 2011 roster, when it comes to the Calgary Vipers, there was a Mike Burns and a Torrey Kate, and they were the only players that actually spent some time in the, actually they're not pitchers, they are pitchers there with their batting stats. They actually did spend some time in the major leagues. And then going to the, looking at other teams that the Calgary Vipers played with in the North American League. In 2011, well, there was the Edmonton Capitals in the North Division. And then we had the Chico Outlaws, which I believe they're in California. And Chico, that team had those jerseys and the logo looked very similar to the Calgary Outlaws from the Canadian Baseball League. Then there was the Lake County Fielders. And then there was a team called the Maui Nauka Aka, if I butchered the name, I'm sorry. But that team played in Hawaii. And then there was the South Division. You had teams like the San Angelo Colts, the Rio Grande Valley White Wings. And then there was the Edinburgh Roadrunners. And then there was the McAllen Thunder, and then the Yuma Scorpions. What made the Yuma Scorpions memorable in 2011, especially for me, was the fact that the manager of the Yuma Scorpions in 2011 was a guy named Jose Canseco. Yes, that Jose Canseco, who used to play in the major leagues. I know that some don't look down on him, the fact that he was behind the juiced book and exposed the steroids that happened in baseball at the time. But yes, this guy right here, I got to actually see Jose Canseco live in person at Foothills Stadium. I think he was in his late 40s at the time, but he was a player and manager. I wasn't at the game, but there was a game that he actually had to pitch for the Yuma Scorpions against the Calgary Vipers. But I do remember seeing Jose Canseco, coming to bat a few times at Foothills Stadium. That's after, his major league career. There was mixed emotions. I mean, I thought it was awesome. I got to see Jose Canseco playing at bat at Foothills Stadium. And, you had the PA announcer saying, now coming to bat for the Yuma Scorpions, Jose Canseco. I remember that. That's like weird. Yeah, that's very weird just to hear that. You just never thought you'd see that. I know in the next episode when I talk about the Cannons, there were definitely some big names that played for the Calgary Cannons that eventually made a name for themselves in the major leagues, and others that, sometimes you go up and down the ranks that we briefly had some big names, but that's all in the baseball queue. And then I shared a couple stories about that John Odom story, about the fact that he was traded for 10 bats. So it may actually happen one time. I don't know if it would happen in professional hockey where it's like, especially the trade deadline coming up where it's like, you can't even trade him for, a bag of hockey sticks or a bag of tape. And then the tales of baseball, talking about Theoren Fleury when he played for the Calgary Vipers very briefly. But yeah, that's all I have for the Remember the Calgary Series. When it comes to the Calgary Vipers, what do you, what do you remember, what do you miss about the Calgary Vipers? I mean, I just kind of miss the fact that we don't really have some kind of major baseball league team in Calgary. Because it was nice when I did start going to Vipers games regularly that I remember, it was a nice something to do on a weekend, Sunday afternoon, Saturday afternoon, especially if it's 30 degrees out. How the stadium was set up. You had the red seats and there was the gold seats. And the red seats, there was all just general admission. But you pay, I think I remember it was like $16 at the time back in 2011. You get assigned seating, sitting in the gold seats. I think the general admission, I think it was only $11. And you could sit wherever you want, but I wanted to be right behind the plate and in the sun. Kind of like, when I'm at football games, but, I just loved that experience. I mean, it wasn't quite the same as the Cannons. I do remember going to the odd Cannons game when I was much younger and just had the allure of knowing that it was the step below the major leagues. And I just don't think, the only way I think Calgary might have more of a chance to get a big Major League Baseball team again, or at least independent ball. I mean, Canada, I think we are doing a little better in terms of developing baseball talent, but going back to, I talked about the Toronto Blue Jays being the only Major League Baseball team, level team in Canada. I missed the Montreal Expos, and there are many reasons why the Expos moved to Washington, but I think there's enough appetite if the Montreal can get a stadium and maybe they can lure a team back in Montreal. Those are the biggest markets, and you can maybe make a case for Vancouver, because if you look at a lot of baseball talent that comes from Canada, they either come from Southern Ontario, which you could probably say is the influence from the Blue Jays, and the interior British Columbia. I think just the appetite and maybe the weather. But I could see maybe Vancouver and Montreal getting a Major League Baseball team again, if they can make it viable. But I don't think Calgary can get a AAA team again. Not with the stadium that we have, and with plans on there being redevelopment plans. I think that stadium is slated for demolition, and there's no appetite right now for getting a baseball team again. I mean, we did briefly have the Dogs, but now they're in Okotoks, which are sort of in Calgary, but it's too far out of the way that maybe we can get a Pioneer team again, or something similar to that when we had the Cardinals and Expos. But I mean, that's all I have for baseball in Calgary. As I keep touching upon in this episode, in the next episode, I think I'll be talking about the team that I think most Calgarians miss the most, with the Calgary Cannons, as that is the biggest team that I think most longtime Calgarians have nostalgia for, and there's definitely a greater history with the Calgary Cannons, and I'm going to be a heck of a time trying to find some relics that I want to share in that episode and talk about players that played here in Calgary that eventually went on to play in the major leagues. So I say I have all the links in the description below to look upon all the players and rosters from the 2005 till 2011. 2008, they do list Theoren Fleury, as he did briefly play for the Vipers. He only played a couple games in that long weekend. Fleury himself even said at that time, he was 40 years old, and said he definitely didn't think he'd have what it took at that time to play baseball all season. But then literally knew that a year later, he would have been trying his luck to come back in the NHL again. He had one heck of a preseason, but they said that at the time he couldn't make it as a top 6 forward. But I thought Theoren Fleury would have been a nice role player for the Calgary Flames back in 2009 and 10, but I didn't make the decision. I'm just a fan, knowing that it was great to see. It was great to see Theoren Fleury do what he did, still being around in the Calgary community, just trying to repair his image. And I know that he does say his political views, but that's all I have for memories of the Calgary Vipers. I just miss the going out to the game. And same as in baseball, I've never been to a Major League Baseball game myself. That is still one thing I want to do, and I know one time I'm going to have to go to Toronto, excuse me, to catch the Blue Jays. But if I'm going to go to Toronto in the summer, I need to book off enough time to make the trip there, trip back, and the Calgary Stampeders must also be playing in Toronto at that same time. Have a time when there's a series with the Blue Jays and the Stampeders in Toronto to capture sports that way. And then I say in the next episode I'll be talking about the Calgary Cannons, and then at the end of this they'll show a few more relics that I can find for the Calgary Vipers. So I just say, what memories you have? What did you like about the Vipers? Or do you have any other wacky stories from the 7 years with the Vipers? I just remember, I think his name was John Burkhart. I think was the president of the Calgary Vipers, and you always saw him at the end of every game. He's like, thank you. Like, he seemed extra thankful in 2011. And I think we kind of know why. I mean, it's just a shame that things ended the way it did for the Vipers, but that's why it's important for me to talk about Calgary sports teams in the past as a Calgary sports fan, to document every. So as I say, if you want to follow along this Calgary sports fan's journey, home the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, and formerly the Vipers, just make sure you hit like, subscribe. I mostly do talk Calgary sports on this channel, currently and in the past with this series, but I also do a variety of non-sports content like personal vlogs, attempt comedy, and I also do share my experience today I'm on the road or at a sport event. So if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, do follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey. You know what to do, just make sure you like, subscribe. I also have my other social media links down in the description below. As I said, definitely I was a lot busier the last few months, with hockey coming back, and the fact that I've been wanting to try to do a little more kind of a live vlogging like I did with the Calgary Stampede, going to Stampede Park with the Stampede Corral demolition, Chinook Blast. And then last week when I walked around McMahon Stadium and Foothills Stadium, I want to do more of those videos, and it seems to actually do a little better for me. And in fact, I actually drawn an interest of a, university student that wants to talk to me about those videos as well. So stay tuned for that. So I'm going to say, let's go Vipers. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. And yes, after this episode, I'll finally get to talk about the Cannons. And then episode 25, I'll talk about Stampede Wrestling, and episode 26, I'll be talking about recapping this whole series. And I already know what song I'm going to use for episode 24. It's very, very fitting. Let's just say it's from Kevin MacLeod, and I'll be able to document it. It's a very familiar song that will be fitting. I'm not too sure you'll know what song I've used, but I haven't picked one up for this episode. But in the next episode, there's already a familiar song that I will use when I come in. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.